This is P.L. Myers, a shot to the top pro wrestling's manager extraordinaire.
This is Steve Michaels, the master of the Chicago Bear Hug.
This is Tim Storm, former NWA World's Heavyweight Champion.
What's up, guys? This is Mr. 3%, John Hudson.
This is Rockstar Johnny Nye, and you're listening to What Do You Say with DDJ. And for those of you who don't tune in, be gone.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 18 of What Do You Say with DDJ. As always, I am your host, DDJ. I'm going to get right to it. My guest this week is Steve Ahrendt. You can hear him along with Joey Roth do the commentary for Chicagoland Championship Wrestling Saturday Night Grapple Masters. It was the October 3rd show that I was at about a month or two ago in Michigan City, Indiana. Now available on Amazon Prime and also Powered 4 TV. We're going to talk about that show. We're going to just have a lot of fun. So sit back, relax, grab a cold one, grab some snacks, and listen to episode 18 of What Do You Say with DDJ. And my guest this week, Steve Ahrendt. All right, here with another episode of What Do You Say with DDJ, and joining me this evening is the voice of Chicagoland Championship Wrestling, although I think one Joey Roth might disagree with that. That would be Mr. Steve Ahrendt. Steve, how you doing tonight?
Wow, there you go. You caught my name right. I appreciate that. Very good. It's great to be here, DDJ. Like what you're doing. Even like the Joey Roth comment, because Joey Roth's pretty important in my life. So thumbs up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, first off, thank you for doing this with me. I really appreciate it.
Hot on the heels of AEW Dynamite, right?
Yeah, I've got another podcast that we're going to be doing War Games predictions. Probably they'll have already aired by the time this drops and stuff. But yeah, we're definitely going to be talking about that and stuff. But man, for those of you who haven't seen it, if you haven't seen it by the time this episode drops, I'm going to spoil it for you anyway. Sting debuted and Kenny Omega won the AEW World Heavyweight title with a little help from Don Callis. And we may have just seen the beginning of an AEW Impact Wrestling partnership.
The road to Super Brawl began tonight. Winter is coming.
I think it's here, and it came with the fury. So, all right. So that wraps up the AEW Dynamite talk portion of the show.
You got to play to all fields there, DDJ. We got to play to all fields.
God, I'm just still coming off that high and stuff. So
That's why I need to get it out there, because I am also super amped up about it myself. So we need to process that before we can talk about Chicagoland Championship Wrestling.
I'm still just wow. I'm trying to catch my breath right now. I'm still getting over it, but
just so many great nuggets tonight. A pay-per-view quality event tonight, and that doesn't happen on live TV very much anymore. They usually save it for the 4-hour Sunday marathons. But boy, they said it was going to be the biggest show in Dynamite history, and it was absolutely as good as advertised.
And then some. So, all right, Steve. So let me get right into it. How did you discover professional wrestling?
Well, once upon a time, that's the way every great story starts, right?
Yeah.
I was a teenager, 14, and MTV was big back in those days. You've heard of MTV, right?
Yeah, they have shows like Teen Mom and 16 and Pregnant, right?
Yes, but back in the day, it was Dexy's Midnight Runners, Rick Springfield, and Duran Duran. So there was music, if you call that music.
You mean back when MTV was actually about the music and...
Indeed, video killed the radio star, but that's neither here nor there. But yes, back in those days, MTV was just everybody watched it. So what they did back in those days is Cyndi Lauper had a lot of ties with professional wrestling. So MTV and the Vince McMahon entourage at that time, Titan Sports, kind of melded together a little bit and created what was called the Rock and Wrestling Connection. So that was my first real taste of it at age 14 on MTV. and I saw WrestleMania 1, and I'm like, well, this is very interesting. And, loved the A-Team as a kid, and now you've got Thunder Lips from Rocky 3, and you've got B.A. Baracus from the A-Team. Well, who the hell wouldn't want to watch that?
Well, let's also not forget, B.A. Baracus was also Clubber Lang in Rocky 3.
Exactly. So the whole family was there. So you couldn't help but not watch. I mean, you didn't have the dirt sheets. You didn't have the internet. So when things like that happened, it was absolutely mystifying to a 14-year-old guy. And then the year after, it was WrestleMania 2, which they did in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. And I was at that moment, I became a huge Hulkamaniac. I mean, Hulk Hogan and King Kong Bundy inside that big blue steel cage.
Yep.
That defined that was my defining wrestling moment. So, I loved WrestleMania 1, but WrestleMania 2, that's where I kicked it into high gear and started to follow it.
Awesome. And obviously you mentioned that you couldn't help but become a Hulkamaniac. Who were some of the other guys that you became a fan of back then?
Well, there were so many great wrestlers back then. I mean, you had to love Ricky Steamboat. I mean, he did amazing things in the ring. When you're Hulkamaniac, you either have a love-hate relationship with Macho Madness, but the Macho Man Randy Savage, that whole thing on Saturday Night's Main Event where, the Hart Foundation and the Honky Tonk Man crack him on the back of the head with a guitar and Elizabeth goes to get Hogan. Well, that's as close to a soap opera as I ever want to get. Right. So the beginning of the Mega Power, so of course you love Macho Man and the Ultimate Warrior. I mean, Roddy Piper was the greatest villain in the history, greatest heel wrestler I ever saw to this day even. So, there were so many great wrestlers back then. Coco Beware was entertaining, the Junkyard Dog. I mean, the British Bulldogs as a tag team. I mean, there were so many great people to watch in those days. And you watched every week, and then sometimes you get a Saturday Night's Main Event. So, there were opportunities to watch a lot, and we watched as much as we could.
Awesome. Now, at this time, was that all you watched was WWF, or did you get to watch like the NWA World Class Championship Wrestling?
I honestly didn't get into that stuff until much later.
Mm-hmm.
I first picked up on WCW and, started to watch all the old Ric Flair stuff.
Right.
And watch all the old Horseman vignettes and became a big, I was a huge fan of Hulk Hogan, but I have since become, a pretty big fan of Ric Flair. Mm-hmm. The days, the 80s and 90s were just amazing times in wrestling. And I think it's largely because things were a surprise, because you didn't have all the inside insight that you have now. So when things happened and things were crazy, you never saw it coming. But nowadays you kind of see it coming. Although I did not forecast Sting's arrival tonight. That there may have been rumors, but I never heard them.
Yeah, I definitely heard those same rumors. And yeah, when the lights went out and you saw that like the winter is coming thing, I'm thinking, what is this? And then I saw the name flash across the screen, and like I told you, off, camera before we started recording. And I said, I'm so thankful that my wife and my son weren't at the house. They're at my mother-in-law's. And I literally screamed out in my living room, holy shit. And that, I mean, that's probably, God, I can't even tell you the last time I said those two words when watching a professional wrestling show, because I was that surprised by something.
Those are the moments that I treasure, when things that are unexpected happen and I don't hear about it ahead of time, and I get a chance to have that feeling again. Like I did when I was a younger man watching wrestling, like that moment, on WCW Monday Nitro a long time ago, where Scott Hall shows up and says, "You know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here." Well, my God, that was the end all be all of human existence. We talked about that for a month.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of what this was like.
Yeah. And I kind of remember that. I remember that moment very well too, because at the time, like you said, this was, I think, the internet was just kind of in the getting started. And so it wasn't definitely where it was today and stuff. And I thought to myself, I was like, wait a minute. I thought he worked for the WWF or was working. I didn't realize that his contract was up and he was coming over.
And see, that's the thing about now and then. Then, everybody in the industry knew that Scott Hall his contract was up, but the fans didn't have any inside information about such things. Mm-hmm. So when he showed up, we all just assumed that he was still working. We're like, oh my God, the WWE's invading.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you saw Kevin Nash the next week, and just thinking, wait, what is going on here?
So like I said, there have been so many great things that have happened that have held my interest. And that's why I've been watching it for as long as I have. Darn near 40 years I've been watching professional wrestling in one form or another.
Yeah, I'm going on 30 years myself. So I'm 40. I discovered it when it started really getting into it when I was 10. So not that far behind you.
We're right there. We're right there.
Yes.
But so it's so great. Like I said, I have so many fond memories,
Mhm.
going to live events when I was a younger man. And, it's been a great ride. I never dreamed I'd be working in this industry, certainly, but here I am.
Yeah, and I'm kind of with you on that because, like I said, doing this podcast, I've gotten to meet, really kind of gotten a chance to get to know a lot of the guys, from CCW. I had John Bullard on my third episode. I've had, CCW superstars. I've had Garrison Creed, Jackson P. Larkin. I just had C-Red on, and just it's really given me an even more of an appreciation for what you guys do. Just because, again, I gotten to know the men behind the characters, and just the one word that I take from every interview I've done is that each and every one of you has been very passionate about this business.
Well, you're getting great guests. The names you mentioned that's part of the core of, I think, what makes CCW as good as it is. John Bullard is a visionary. He's unlike anybody I've ever really worked with because he's always moving forward. He's got a very much a big picture mentality. So that's how you get a guy that's partnering up with Elevate Pro in Louisiana and, some of the lucha federations in Mexico. He's spreading out to make open channels of travel, for, wrestlers to travel and work in different places. And it creates a unity in this business, kind of like the old territory days in a strange way.
Mm-hmm.
He's also got us involved with Fight, Amazon Prime. So, he's a guy that's always looking at the bigger picture. Then you take a guy like Garrison Creed, who is a legit soldier.
Yep.
And he wrestles like he's in a combat zone.
Mm-hmm.
And his story is so visceral and so incredible that you just feel glad to know who he is. And, Jackson Larkin hasn't been in the business for a long time, but nobody hits with that concrete fist harder than Jackson does. I sat at ringside for 3 hours, and I can attest to that. So you've had some really good guests. And C-Red, well, that speaks for itself. C-Red has been around 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
He's been the Soul Touches. If you don't know the Soul Touches, you have to. I mean, you've been in the business long enough to know who they are.
Right.
Mark the Rocket Acid Jazz, C-Red, Willie Richardson. I mean, that is a historic faction in this area. So, anytime you see C-Red, it's like, my God, I remember the days at Windy City when these guys were just starting out and they were just dominant. So you had some great guests, man. Congratulations to you. You're really bringing in the backbone of CCW.
Well, yeah. And I mean, like I said, and one of the things that really validated me doing this was like when I went to the show on October 3rd and, I went and introduced myself to a lot of the guys that I had on. Like Garrison Creed was like one of the first people I sought out. I talked to Jackson P. Larkin. Obviously, I talked with John before the show and stuff, and it's just the one thing that every single one of them said to me was thank you, for having him on, giving him that voice. And like John's been extremely grateful because I'm helping, promote his product, and he's given me every reason to do so with the way he's, not only I've heard he treats the wrestlers, but he treats the fans. Like I was sitting outside of the VFW with my friend Brad, who I went to the show with, and John come out, and walked over and introduced, himself to us both personally, and made sure to thank us both for everything we do to help him out. And I mean, I could sense it that like, he meant every word he said.
He's a very honest man, and he is a promoter unlike many I've met. He was walking people to their seats on October 3rd, sending thank you notes to people that bought tickets.
Yep.
He really has attention to detail, and he knows that if the fans weren't happy or if the fans didn't like the product, we wouldn't have a very long run. So John does things very well and does them for the right reason, which is why the buzz about CCW is warranted And it's just the beginning, because what we did on October 3rd, just remember, that's the first show. That's the pilot episode. Yep. And, you know, every great series, you know, the pilot episode kind of gets you kickstarted. But when you go back, you know, after you've seen the series as it's been around for a while, you know, the pilot episode is never your favorite. There's always something that comes later that blows you away, and you're always like, oh, man, you remember that episode? So we opened the door with Grapple Masters 1, but it's just the opening of the door. There's so much more to come, and it's just going to get bigger. It's just going to get better, and it's just going to get more entertaining.
Yeah. So let me get into a little bit more about you now again.
Okay.
When did you decide that you wanted to get involved with the wrestling business?
Well, it all happened by accident, and I mean that in the most literal of sense. When I turned 43, rather than have a midlife crisis, I decided, what do I really want to do? I have a good job and I have a family, so, you know, you can't take too many risks, but, you know, I felt like there was something missing. So I always thought I could do sports radio, and I listened to sports talk radio every day on my way to work, on my way home. And I'm like, I'm twice as entertaining as any of these guys that I'm listening to. How do I go about doing it? So I enrolled for classes at the Illinois Media School in Lombard.
Oh yeah.
So it's a night school. I worked my 11-hour a day job during the day, and then I went to IMS at night, and I trained to be a broadcaster. You know, I trained how to, you know, do radio, how to, you know, all of that stuff. And it's an excellent program, and it allows you to meet a lot of people in the industry. The only problem is, when you're a 43-year-old father of 2, and, you know, you need to work to sustain your family, it's very difficult to get a job in radio, because it's very much a who you know thing, and you kind of have to start small and move out of town. So when I graduated, I had quite a few offers to do radio because I was pretty good at it, but they were all over the place, you know, way out of other states, way far away. And entry-level radio positions are minuscule pay, and it's impossible for me to take a pay cut of that degree to go do that.
Right.
So, you know, I didn't give up on the radio dream, never will, but it wasn't the right time. So the guy that ran the sports radio department at the school was doing some live wrestling. He was like, they were taping and broadcasting and doing camera work for, you know, some of the local wrestling promotions. And they said, hey, they're looking for a play-by-play man. You know, you've done football, you've done baseball. Do you want to give wrestling a go? And I was a wrestling fan, so I'm like, yeah, I'll give it a go. So there I was on an October night in PCW at an event called Grave Matters. And basically what I did was pretend to be JR for 3 hours and scream slobber knocker and oh my God over and over and over again. So that's kind of how I backed into wrestling. You know, I showed up as part of the IMS crew, and I did the last 3 shows that PCW did October, November, and December that year.
So that would be 2014, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
That is correct. So, you know, then in December, after their final show, which was fantastic, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat was the special guest, and that was the auspicious night where Joe Heisman and Vic Capri wrestled, and they went up to the rafters. And
I was actually there at that show.
Joe Heisman threw Vic through many a table.
Yep, I was actually there with my best friend, and that was our first PCW show in probably about 11 years. And I remember saying to my friends, like, man, we got to start going back to these. And then like a couple weeks later, we got the unfortunate news.
Yeah, it was a tough pill because I was really getting into it and I was really enjoying it. Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay, well, you know, easy come, easy go, right? So that plays forward to the next summer. And in the summer, I got a call from the school. Now, I had already graduated, so I wasn't with them anymore, but I got a call from the guy, Pete Ferrari, who was running the sports department, and he said, hey, some of the guys that work at PCW asked me to get in touch with you because they want you to do play-by-play for them. And so began my relationship with Crash Tested Wrestling.
Okay.
And it was a couple of the guys, Jared Priest, Tom Heisman, BOW, some of those guys from PCW had remembered and liked what I was doing on commentary, and they brought me in to do commentary for their company.
Very cool. So where else during that time were you working?
Well, I mean, like I said, PCW is my first gig. Then I worked for a few years with Crash Tested Wrestling. And then when Crash Tested Wrestling went away in 2017, a couple of the guys that I met in Crash Tested, Braun the Lumberjack and Mitch Blake, the Rage, those guys had their own promotion called Global Professional Wrestling. So I got out of Crash Tested and went into GPW. And GPW basically changed my existence in wrestling because I was not a broadcaster there, which is what I had been in the other two places. Mm-hmm. Now they said, well, you know what? We don't want you to do broadcasting here. We want you to be the general manager. So now I'm an on-screen character as opposed to just being a voice. So I was general manager until the company went away in 2019. And I actually got to wrestle in matches. I got some training. You know, I got to be in a couple of really, really unpleasant matches to watch. So I got to see the other side of wrestling. I've been calling it for years. I've been watching it for years. Well, now I'm in the ring getting my ass kicked. So I'm like, oh, so this is what it's like. So
did that give you like even more of an appreciation for what these guys do when you were actually, you know, having these matches?
I'll tell you what, I trained for 4 months to do a 3-minute match. To do 3 minutes of solid performing, I trained for 4 months. And when they tell you that wrestling is, you know, you hear the people saying, well, it's scripted, it's not real, blah, 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 blah. You know, it might be, but the work that has to go in to make it sell and make it real is hard. The training that I went through was very difficult. I got beat up a lot, you know, a lot of sore nights spent, a lot of sore knees. But you know, when I got to see the matches after they were over, you know, all the months of training, it was worth it because now I was, at least for a night, one of the guys. And you know, it was a magic moment for me, and I'll never forget it as long as I live.
Yeah, I can imagine. So obviously now, you know, having done the role of commentator, on-screen character, and professional wrestler, can you tell me like what are like some of the things that you have to do like when you prepare for like say a commentary gig versus actually, you know, like being an on-screen character, you know, performing? Like what are some of the differences involved with all of those different parts?
Well, I'll tell you, you know, it's a good question. When you're doing commentary, you prepare for quite a few weeks before an event. You know, you're getting in touch with all the wrestlers because you want to get all of their finishing moves, their name pronunciations, the things they're going to do, and you want to watch some of their old matches so you get a feel for what they're going to do in the ring. I had some great commentary partners at Crash Tested Wrestling. I have a great commentary partner in Joey Roth at CCW. Who I enjoy very much, but I had some really good partners, and one of them, you know, obviously Steve Kenton being one, and Nick Swinky being number two. And Nick Swinky, the professor, is one of the most astute scholars of wrestling that I've ever encountered on planet Earth. There's nothing he doesn't know about this business. So I was more of the describing, you know, the scenery and the crowd and the reactions. I was more better at color. And Swink was talking about Hurricanranas and lariats and European uppercuts. You know, the vernacular I've been watching for a long time, but, you know, sometimes, you know, everybody has a name for everything. What I consider a body slam or a suplex has 600 different names. Falcon's Arrow, this, that, and the other thing. So, you know, you got to really try to get in touch with these people to find out what they're calling their stuff. And even trying to get all that information, sometimes you don't have enough, and, you know, it can get a little wonky on screen, so to speak. But it was great working with Nick because he knows everything so cold. So I always try to be like him when it comes to, you know, getting my wrestling notes together, because the last thing you want to do when you're commentating a match and you're trying to sound professional is to not know something and sound stupid.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So let me ask you this, because I've heard, various things that both like that, some do, some don't stuff. But when you're doing like commentary for these matches and you're prepping, do you have advanced knowledge of what the intended result's going to be, or is it just kind of like you just go as if you don't know what's going on?
Well, I prefer knowing as little as possible. And the reason that, and everybody that I've ever worked with gets mad at that. Well, we want you to know. No, I'd rather not, because I feel what I always enjoyed about commentary. And like I said, I've been listening to the greats my whole life. Gorilla Monsoon, Jim Ross. I mean, I had the great pleasure of interviewing Jim Ross once upon a time, and he is a hero to me. I mean, everything I do behind a mic is because Jim Ross did it first. Tony Schiavone, I had a chance to meet him at the StarCast event before the AEW show in Chicago a few years back.
Yep.
These are the guys that are on my Mount Rushmore of broadcast commentators in the industry of wrestling. So, you try to follow their lead. And what I always like about these guys is their spontaneity and their enthusiasm. To me, when I would listen to JR, I would never believe that he knew it was coming. He was that good and he could be that spontaneous. Well, I'm not JR and I'm not Schiavone and I'm certainly not Gorilla Monsoon. So I need the element of surprise so I can deliver that style of performance, which is what I want. I want to be excited. I want to be amped up. I want to let the fans that are listening to us know that this is an exciting thing and a big moment. And if you had a chance to watch the championship match at Grapple Masters between Marshe Rockett, Shogun Chris Logan, and Garrison Creed, I had very, very little knowledge about how that match was going to go. Did I know how it would end? Yes. But did I know how it was going to go? No. And, the 7 years I've been doing this, I think that was my finest commentary that I've ever done. I'm very proud of it. Even though we had to do it again, I still think it was some of the best work I've ever done because I didn't know everything that was going to happen. And as it was happening, I got to be surprised, just like you.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, one of the things in listening to your response to my question I kind of thought to myself is I would kind of be in that same boat as well, where I wouldn't want to know, because I almost feel like, in addition to what you said, the reactions to, like say a match finish or something like that would be that much more genuine.
And you're absolutely right. And the best example I can think of when it comes to that is Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler had no idea that The Undertaker was going to throw Mankind off the top of the Hell in the Cell through the table. There were two people in that building that knew that was going to happen, and some medical staff, so they were in position. That was a very guarded thing. So when they did it, and you hear JR and you hear Jerry Lawler call that match, when that happens, that is some of the most organic, spontaneous reactions to what you're witnessing, which was something that had never really ever been seen before in that format. So that's what draws me in, and that's where I'm always trying to be. I always want to be that excited to put something over the way they were that night, because that's the greatest call I've ever heard in wrestling.
Yeah, I don't know if you got a chance to catch Mick Foley's show about a couple of years ago when he was at the Zanies in Rosemont for the 20th anniversary tour he did for Hell in a Cell and stuff. My wife actually got tickets for us to go for my birthday that year, and just hearing some of the stories behind that match just made me appreciate it even that much more.
If you ever listen to JR talk, and we weren't allowed to ask him, because when I interviewed him, I was only allowed to talk about the fact that he was calling boxing on Fight TV, and I was allowed to talk about his barbecue sauce. So I wasn't able to ask any wrestling questions, but he brought up wrestling. So I kind of got in the back door because I kind of lulled him into a false sense of security. And, I said, really enjoy your call. Oh, well, do you remember that match? And then all of a sudden it stopped being about boxing and barbecue sauce. And it was all about Hell in the Cell and Stone Cold and, the good old days when he was, doing his thing in the WWE. So, to hear the best ever talk about those moments that he remembers and why they were so good, that's what it means to me.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a huge I'm a huge fan. You mentioned going to Starcast. I've been to both Starcasts that were in Chicago, and I just love it. Like when I get a chance to talk to these wrestlers and these, basically anybody involved with the business, because being as appreciative of a fan of like everything that goes on and stuff, I always love hearing the stories behind, like these matches and these moments, and it's just it's really cool to get like the perspective from those that were actually there, because it just, you may learn some things you didn't know, you may gain a new appreciation for something maybe you didn't quite fully understand.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's absolutely right. And especially at the first Starcast, I mean, people were just wandering around.
Yep.
You could throw a quarter and somebody that you knew at Alundra Blaze walks by. Yep. Jeff Jarrett walks by. Yep. I was doing a Starcast with Jonathan Hood from ESPN 1000, who was a teacher of mine at the Illinois Media School, and he does his Under the Hood podcast where he talks about wrestling all the time. Jonathan Hood is a huge wrestling fan, and if ESPN 1000 would remove the large pole from their rear end, they'd give him a wrestling show on the weekend and let him talk about wrestling, because he's really got great insight, and he does one hell of a Jim Ross impression. If you've never heard Jonathan Hood do Jim Ross, it is one of the greatest things you'll ever hear in your life, because it is spot freaking on. But, he was, he knows a lot of the people in the business. So when Dave LaGreca came by, he sat down with us and he talked to Jonathan for a while. And then Road Warrior Animal, who I had met at CTW, sat with us, and we got to interview him. So, it's a big fraternity up there, and they'll always come in and they'll always tell stories. That's what they love to do. So you just have to sit back and listen and appreciate the opportunity. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, that was kind of one of my favorite things about that, especially that first Starcast, was just like you said, you turn around and like you said, you'd see Jeff Jarrett, walking by. I remember looking, I think, one way, and I think I saw Scott Steiner was eating in the, where the dining area. I sure as heck wasn't going to go over and bother him while he was eating and stuff. But
no, he's a tough customer. I've worked with Scott Steiner before. Not always the most pleasant human.
That's what I've heard. And one other really chance occurrence that I kind of had happen at that first Starcast, and it's kind of took a little bit more of a significance today with the news that broke this morning. I was actually waiting for a friend of mine to meet up with him because he was doing something. And all of a sudden I turn around and I see Pat Patterson just coming into the room, and I'm just like, I went over, shook his hand. I said, hey, thank you for everything you've done. Can I get a quick picture with you? It's like, yeah, sure. I took a selfie with him. Boom. Like you said, that 2 seconds just totally made it. And then just like I said, I was just thinking about that today, when I woke up and got the news that, unfortunately he passed away. 2020
has taken a lot of the greats in not only wrestling, but in the arts and in music. Mm-hmm. It's been a rough year for loss, for sure. And Pat Patterson just compounds the bad year that this has been. Trailblazer, pioneer. WWE wouldn't be where it is without some of the things he did behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
Even Vince McMahon came out today and paid tribute to Pat Patterson, and he doesn't come out very much for anybody anymore. So it's another giant in the industry lost. I was really shook when we lost the Road Warrior a few months ago.
Me too.
Because I had a chance to work with him 3 or 4 times, and I'd met him several times, and he was such a great guy. And the fact that he, when he would come to work at the shows I was at, he'd be like, "Hey, Steve, how you been?" How does this man, who has been the greatest tag team wrestler of all time, he has worked everywhere, he has met a million people, how did he remember my name was Steve? It was unbelievable to me.
Right. I know. I had when P.O. Myers, like we talked about a little bit, was my very first guest on my podcast, and we spent some time talking about Hawk and Animal. And then when Animal passed, I did a quick tribute episode, and I messaged him like, hey, do you want to do this with me? Because I know his history with the Road Warriors and his experiences. He hopped on, and we did about a little half-hour show, and he actually was back in 2003. He introduced me, like, because of P.L. Myers, I got to spend the day with Hawk and Animal and Paul Ellering, and it's just, yeah, it shook me really bad when Hawk passed away, and it was even worse when Animal passed away, because, like, I remember being in the car, I was driving somewhere, and I was crying just thinking about it, and I actually had to call my mom just to calm me down and stuff, because it hit me that much.
They become a part of your life, you know. Your heroes are a part of your life. Maybe they don't know who you are or what you are, but you know who they are, and they mean something to you. So when they pass away, it's a piece of your life that's taken away. So
Absolutely.
it's natural. It's natural to have these feelings, and we all have them.
Right. So, okay, so let me ask you this. How did you get into contact with John Bullard and wind up in CCW?
Well, that's another great story. I'm glad you asked. Once upon a time, I worked at a company called IPW, Ileana Professional Wrestling, which may or may not be run by Rion Skills. The jury is still out. Don't ask Rion that question. But anyway, Rion has been a good friend of mine throughout all of my years in this business. He's a great man, one of my closest friends in this business. I love him to death. And he said, hey, I love what you're doing at GPW. I love what you're doing at CSW. Can you come out and do something for me? Well, Rion doesn't ask for anything ever, and he gives so much. So when he asked me to come do this, I didn't care what it was. I would have come out there and I would have mopped the floor, but Rion asked you, so you go do it. So are you familiar with the beer drinking champion, Sean Danger? Has that name ever come across your pipeline?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, so there's this very, very small human called Sean Danger. His beard is taller than his physical person. He looks like a miniature ZZ Top member. Uncanny. But he carries around this beer drinking title, and he's drunk all the time, and he carries a canister of whiskey, and he somehow wins his matches in a drunken state. It's like if Orange Cassidy was drunk.
It's funny you mentioned Orange Cassidy, because the way you're describing this guy to me is like that was the first guy that popped in my head.
It's uncanny, the similarities, and I don't think he means to do it. So the situation was this. Every month at IPW, somebody challenges Sean Danger to a beer drinking contest. C-Red challenged him. C-Red and him have some really great history as far as fights, which are great. You should look them up. And then former CTW boss Antoine Clemens was in the beer drinking contest. So Rion says, hey, we'd like you to do the beer drinking contest. So I do the beer drinking contest, and it's not beer drinking. We're drinking whiskey. So he hands me a bottle of whiskey. He says, do you want to drink out of my thermos, or do you want to drink out of this bottle? Well, I'm not going to drink out of his thermos. Give me the bottle. Right. So we start our competition, and I'm drinking my bottle, and I'm winning easily. And all of a sudden he says, by the way, that's not whiskey, that's my urine. So I spit everywhere. And then I stomped a mud hole in his ass. So we have heat. So that night that I drank Sean Danger's urine, I met John Bullard. So it was a bad night, yet it was a good night. And at that time, John Bullard was a acting wrestler, and he had a match that night. So I got a chance to talk to him in the locker room a little bit after the show. So that's how I met him. And then I talked to him a couple of times, through the years. So, I saw Chicagoland Championship Wrestling. He was putting it together, and he was starting to advertise. C-Red is part of it. Tully Bertorelli is part of it. So he started putting together his roster, and he would, put up pictures of who he signed. So I thought it was really cool, and I'm like, this is spectacular. And then he signs Joey Roth to be a member of the commentary, and I'm like, well, God, I wonder who they're going to get to have Joey. I wonder who Joey Roth's partner is going to be. This would be great. Now, granted, I hadn't done commentary in a few years, but I'm like, God, I would love an opportunity. Next thing I know, my direct message goes off, and it's John Bullard saying, hey, we would love you to come join the team and be partner with Joey Roth on commentary. I couldn't have typed yes faster than I did. I would have done it for free. You don't have to pay me to do that. I would do it just to be a part of it. So the fact that I get compensated to do it is just a bonus in life because I do it for free. Don't tell John that though. Don't let John see. Let's edit this out later in post-production. But anyway, that's how I met John, and then later on, John came and said, "Hey, will you be part of this?" And since we've been doing it, I've been doing other things behind the scenes with John. He gives all of his people a lot of room to put some of their own personality and their ideas behind the product, and that's what makes it feel like a family and a team effort.
Yeah, I just, like I said again, I can't commend John enough on how well put together his company is and stuff. I mean, I was impressed with the overall. Well, let me ask you this: when you got to the VFW that day, what were your first impressions when you kind of walked out and saw the setup?
Well, I'll tell you, my first impressions came the night before because I wanted to get in there and get a look at how the setup was going to be, and I wanted to do some advisory role on the way the cameras were going to be placed. So I got there before everybody, and I started moving chairs because when we got into that room, it was set up for a fish fry. So we had to move everything that night. So I worked for about 2.5, almost 3 hours with those guys getting that venue set up. Mm-hmm. So when I left, because I live an hour and a half away from Michigan City, so I had to leave to go home because I had to work the next day, and then go to the show.
Right.
When I got back there the next day, it had morphed into this really professional looking thing. And when I left there the night before, you could see where it was headed. But when I got there, my eyes just boggled because it was so amazingly put together, and everything was right. Everything was and there were a lot of stumbling blocks with locker room placements and the way things had to be, just because the way the rooms were set up. But everything just came out so beautifully, and the show went off as smoothly as any show I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, you're kind of echoing my sentiments of that. Like, I remember, getting in there, and one time I kind of looked around and I said, "Man, this is really cool." And I told John this later, and I told a couple of the other wrestlers and stuff, and I was telling my friend Brad, I'm like, "Man, this has a real old school NWA like power theme to feel to it and stuff," and that was the first impression that I got. And it just throughout the show, just the whole thing, I just felt like, man, this just feels like an old school NWA show.
Well, you know what? It's studio wrestling, so studio wrestling is studio wrestling, so it's certainly going to have an NWA flavor to it. But the way Xavier and the boys at Pro Wrestling Shoots, the way they film, they film in a very cinematic style. So when you watched it on Amazon Prime, were you not impressed of how close to the action you always were? It's almost as if you were in the ring at times with those guys.
Right.
And that's so that makes it so entertaining.
Right. Yeah. Xavier's a good friend of mine and stuff. So he's been one of my biggest supporters of this podcast, and I'm actually planning on having him on here within the next couple of episodes to talk about. You should definitely have him
here. Xavier is a wizard.
Yes.
And I mean that in all the right ways, because the way he shot, the way he edited, and the way he was able to go back in and allow us to re-record the commentary and have it get put together seamlessly. There aren't many people in this industry that can pull off that kind of magic. And I was sitting in his basement a few weeks after the show as we were recording it, and I watched his face as we were doing it, and he laughed and he was having a good time with it. And he says, "I think you've given me some really good stuff to work with." And then lo and behold, I got the chance to see the finished product. And I'm like, how did you take that and make this? I can't give him enough credit to what you see on the screen. I mean, yes, the wrestlers did great matches. I mean, the matches from the match one to the main, it was a solid card of some excellent action. And the characters were great, and the fans were great, and everything went perfectly. But the way it was captured, the way it was edited, and the way the audio was fixed, I give him all the credit in the world. He is a miracle worker.
Yeah, and like I remember, like I was actually, like I said, I'm only about a third of the way through. I haven't gotten through the whole show yet, but I remember watching it and then just like not even maybe partway through the very first match, which was Yo-Yo versus Miles Mercer. I messaged him on Facebook Messenger and said, dude, this looks amazing. You did an amazing job, and he got back to me a few minutes later, was really appreciative of that. And then, like I said, that's when I got the like, I need to get him on because I want to talk to him about this and stuff, and that. So
he's a very sharp, very smart, very good dude.
Yeah.
And he took good care of us when we went to his house. And, I can't wait to see what he does on April 17th because, that card is already shaping up to be something special. And, it's not going to be our first rodeo this time. It's going to be the second show. So everything is going to be better. The audio is going to be better. The video is going to be better. There are going to be things that we introduce that are different. So, that's the thing that having John Bullard in charge, it's never going to feel stagnant. It's never going to feel the same. It's going to be constantly evolving. So what you see on Amazon Prime now and what you'll see after April 17th, it's going to be like two totally different shows. And that's the best part because you never want to give everybody the same thing twice. You want to evolve and you want to grow.
Right. And that's kind of, you bring up an interesting point about like what you see live versus, what you see, because it felt like I said, again, I was there, for the October 3rd. I actually bought my ticket for the April 17th show at the October 3rd show. So I'm going to be there for that.
Thank you.
I'm not going to, the only thing that's going to be different is this time is I'm actually getting a hotel room because I had about a 2-hour drive to make after that show got over with. And I was lucky to make it home still fully awake and that. So, but
I'm right there with you, man. That was a long ride home and I was exhausted.
But like I said, it's just like I remember the show, but then like I said, I went back and started watching it on Amazon Prime today, and it just felt like it was like a totally different experience,
I felt the same way. I was in commentary. I mean, I had the best seat in the house, yet watching it played back and listening to myself, it was surreal and it was great. Like I said, I thought the show was really good. I mean, I'm my own worst critic. I went through the show and I had on a notepad 3 pages of things that I didn't do well and didn't do right. So I've got a lot of work to do to make myself better. But, like I said, I tell everybody it's, it was our first adventure. It was my first commentary in like 5 years. So it's going to get better. It's going to get tighter. It's going to get more entertaining because now we have that first one under our belt and we get to watch it and learn a lot. We learn what we did well. We learn what wasn't quite as good, and we can change it, fix it, and make better adjustments than our Chicago Bears do moving into the second show.
You had to go with the.
We know how to make adjustments at halftime. So when you go into the second half, it will be better.
Yeah, Matt Nagy, if you're listening to this, pay attention to what this man just said.
Oh, Matt Nagy. We're going to be so happy when somebody else comes in here. So happy.
But then again, we were kind of happy when he came in here replacing John Fox. So
well, that's like I said. Sometimes it's when you have a plate full of Brussels sprouts, and you get offered a plate full of cauliflower, you're happy because cauliflower is way better than Brussels sprouts. But then if somebody offers you a cheeseburger, you're like, well, So it's based on you don't know what's good until you've had good. That's what I'm trying to say.
And as a
no offense to the Brussels sprout fans in the world.
Well, as a person who always appreciates a good cheeseburger, yeah, I totally get where you're going with that. So
I'm just saying, when you've been eating ramen noodles for a long time and somebody offers you a steak, that might taste a little better.
It might. I 100% agree with that. So, alrighty then. So, like I said, we obviously, between you and I chatting before we recorded, while we were recording and stuff like that, obviously you're you're still an avid fan. You follow the product at, feverishly, probably on the same level I do. Cause again, we both had that same level of excitement with the just recently concluded episode of Dynamite. So I'm assuming you still follow like WWE Impact. You still watch everything?
Well, I do watch WWE fairly regularly. I watch AEW weekly. I haven't, there are moments. I'll be honest with you. Everybody tells me that I should watch it, and I just never seem to catch it. And I DVR it, but I never seem to watch it. I just haven't warmed up to NXT, and I know that's sacrilege, and I should, because I love Shotzi Blackheart, and she's like getting the biggest push on NXT right now.
Yes.
So I should be watching it, but I just haven't. So I'm gonna make a real effort in 2021 to watch that on the regular. I watch Impact every now and again. I was a big fan of NWA Power. I watched
Me too.
And we got lucky on our radio, on the radio podcast that I do called The Gorilla Position with Martez Zale and the Macho Ghost. If you don't know that, check it out because it's pretty entertaining. I got to interview Nick Aldis, Tim Storm.
Yep.
So we've had some really good guys on that show. And we're big fans of the NWA Power because they work with us all the time. So I was sorry to see, the pandemic knock them out, but they're coming back too. And now that we've got AEW invading Impact, obviously Thunder Rosa has been showing up on AEW with the NWA title. So it just sounds to me like they're all collaborating and setting that stage. So when you get a thing called Super Brawl, it actually lives up to the hype, which would be great. I haven't paid for, I get the network, but I haven't actually paid for a pay-per-view old school style in a long time. I haven't done an AEW pay-per-view. If somehow Impact, AEW, and NWA come together for a Super Brawl spectacular, I don't think there'll be a wrestling fan alive that won't pay $49.95 to see that thing, because that's just historic.
Right. Well, it's kind of funny you mentioned like all the crossovers and everything. You mentioned Thunder Rosa and the NWA women's title. It's kind of weird that, the current NWA women's champion is actually an AEW contracted wrestler, and that being Serena Deeb.
Exactly.
And
so it just goes to show you that, I love storytelling. I think it's gone by the wayside a lot, but I think maybe it's starting to come back a little bit. It took some lean times to befall the world of professional wrestling for them to get it. Everybody loves to see, moonsaults off the top rope and flying off the top rope, crashing through a table.
Mm-hmm.
You love to watch the Jacksons flip around the ring. Wrestling is why you watch. But if wrestling had no story, if you didn't give a damn about the characters and what they're befalling, that it would be really difficult to watch it all the time, because you should just watch wrestling on ESPN if you like that kind of stuff.
Right.
But we love the stories, and we've loved the stories our whole lives. And WWE, excuse me, for the longest time, their stories they weren't really up to the level that I was used to. Mm-hmm. Well, now I'm not a big fan of Bray Wyatt, never have been, but what they're doing with him, Alexa Bliss, and that whole thing is starting to pick up some steam, because now it's getting compelling. So like I said, their storytelling is coming back, and that's what we need more of for sure.
Well, let me ask you this, because you kind of headed in that direction. What are your thoughts on what WWE's done with Roman Reigns?
Well, it's funny. The payoff will certainly be WrestleMania, mm-hmm. because the minute he started doing I Am the Chief and the Head of the Table and all of these things, it's basically telegraphing Reigns versus The Rock at WrestleMania.
Right.
The natural progression. It everybody that's ever watched this sport, and you see The Rock, getting all ripped, and he's publicly announcing his workouts again. Mm-hmm. He hadn't done that in a long time. The last time he really got on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and you saw him pumping iron, I'm getting at it, I'm getting after it, was the last time he came back and did that little vignette with, why can't I think of her name? I should be shot.
Becky Lynch?
No, not Becky Lynch. MMA star.
Ronda Rousey.
Yeah, Ronda Rousey. God. That's what happens when you get old there, DDJ. You start to get
know. I've had my fair share of senior moments.
Yeah, Ronda Rousey. So, when Rock came in and was working with Ronda Rousey, he was The Rock again. His body was in wrestling shape, and you can see that that's where he's going. So it's no secret that it's all about family, and they've been beating that to death, and they're doing that for a reason. So that's a story. They're telling a story, and WrestleMania is in April. So you need to tell a story to get this thing building up to crescendo at WrestleMania. So, it's the obvious play. I don't know how you end it. I mean, is the Rock going to take the fall to Roman Reigns? I mean, the Rock's kind of a proud guy. The Rock's got legacy like anybody, like Undertaker, Triple H. Is he gonna take the fall to his family? Who knows? So stay tuned. I like it. I'm happy with it. It's certainly given the Usos something to do.
Right. Yeah. Discussions I've had with some friends and stuff. It's just like really these last couple of weeks to really open my eyes to how good Jey Uso it really is, because I mean, he's been given the ball I think out of anybody with this whole Roman Reigns thing, he's probably benefited the most out of all of this.
And he has, and you're right. And SmackDown of late has been the better of the two shows.
Agreed.
But the last couple of Raw episodes, I see improvements there.
Mm-hmm.
Randy Orton is doing entertaining work again. He hasn't done entertaining work in quite a while. I thought his battle with Edge, when Edge came back, was interesting, but I thought it lacked something. He seems to have had a fire lit under him, and I'm enjoying what he's doing now a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I think that's playing well into a feud with Bray Wyatt. I think that's going to be an interesting thing, and we've already seen it. So
right.
Why do we want to see it again? Because they're energizing the story, and you throw in crazy Alexa Bliss, and it's like she's a wild card. You don't know what's going to happen with her. I mean, at some point she's going to get beaten up, and that will send Bray Wyatt into some kind of demonic possession situation, I'm sure. So I look forward to things like that. So when I'm starting to think about what I'd like to see, you've got me. I'm in. Now I'm trying to predict what you're going to do. So, I've already told you that I'm looking to see The Rock at WrestleMania. Right. So now I'm watching to see little clues. So they're bringing me in. That's the storytelling. They're giving me something to sink my teeth into that maybe I didn't know.
Right. So the one concern I have about that though is just, do you think enough time will have lapsed that like people will actually be able to see this match live if we get Reigns versus Rock at WrestleMania?
Oh, boy, you know what? The world right now it's just a state of chaos. Mm-hmm. With this virus circling the world and killing people and making people really sick. We just had Thanksgiving, and I was telling a friend of mine earlier tonight, it's the first Thanksgiving that I've had since I've been married that I actually ate Thanksgiving at my house. I usually go to family houses,
right?
But that wasn't open this year because some family members had COVID. And we didn't want to risk it. I mean, it right. broke our hearts to not be able to go, but the civic responsibility that we have is that, we shouldn't be out there potentially spreading an illness. And I think, there are a lot of people that have a lot of different theories about this. I mean, I'm just one guy. I have one belief. There are 6 million other people that say the virus is fake. It's not real. There are people that say it's real, but you should live your life. I mean, there are a lot of schools of thought. I have young kids. I have elderly parents, and, it's just not worth the risk to me. So right. we stayed home, and, we had a great Thanksgiving, the four of us. So, in a time that was a little filled with sorrow, there was some good that come of it. And I hope that's what people are getting out of this. Don't lament for what you don't have. Be happy with what you do have. And we all want to go back to wrestling shows. I've worked with many shows during the back half of the pandemic. At Chicago Style Wrestling, we had 3 shows. We had a show in August, September, and October. So while the world was kind of opened back up a little bit, we were able to do some outdoor shows. Mm-hmm. And we had a great time. We had great crowds. We had good weather, so that really helps. Promotions like Warrior Wrestling did some yep. really nice things outside. Yeah. You got to see Janela versus Robert Anthony, mm-hmm. And Frank the Clown, and the flip off the goalpost, which was very memorable. Kylie Ray versus God, I can't remember her name either. Anyway, it was a great match. It was the
Madison Rain.
Yeah, Madison Rain. Madison Rain's last match in the Indies. Right. So we're glad that we had opportunities like that. I'm glad Kylie Ray and Sky Blue got to fight at CSW in September. It meant a lot to everybody. So, the fact that we did get to wrestle in front of fans, although, we only had a certain amount of tickets. I mean, you yourself were at Chicagoland Championship Wrestling, and that venue was far from full. We put in as many people as we could safely put in according to the guidelines. So, had we been allowed to sell as many tickets as we could, we would have had 350 people in that room, and you would have felt like a sardine. I mean, we would have packed that place silly. We were turning requests away. That's the buzz that Chicagoland Championship Wrestling. But you have to do things the right way, and it's not worth risking the lives of your fans or your family or your friends. So we tried to work within the parameters, and then we were supposed to have a show at CSW in November that got canceled because the restrictions came back around. And the venue we were going to work out of, they weren't going to allow more than 10 people. So, at that point, we're wrestling for ourselves, and it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And on the grander scale, WWE is working in the Thunderdome, where they've got the video screens. It's a clever idea, and it kind of makes it feel like a live event, and it's worked. AEW letting, some people in a very social distance fashion.
Right.
It's been working. But there may come a time again where we can't go to events. I mean, eventually, if this thing keeps going bad, they have football fans that are getting to watch football a little bit, 10,000 people in a 50,000 seat venue. But if the virus gets out of control, they're going to shut that down too. So I'm hoping that people will live intelligently throughout the rest of 2020 so that when 21 comes around, we can start having live events again with fans, because wrestling without fans, it just loses a lot, because a lot of the storytelling that we do is based on direct interaction with the fans. So if the fans don't get to come back, it's going to hurt wrestling big time in 21.
Right. And it's just, I like that you just mentioned about the fans and stuff, because one of the things that I noticed when, things started shutting down, like when the WWE went, I think they started doing the shows at the Performance Center before they moved to the Thunderdome. Like those first few shows, and well, heck, even God, for a while when they were wrestling in front of nobody, and it just I remember watching that first show. I think it was a SmackDown or something, and it's like, there was no crowd, and I'm just like, to me there, that first time I let my eyes lay down, saw on my screen, no crowd. It just really, just in my mind, just really emphasized how important the crowd is to what you guys do.
Yeah, and it's been great because the big promotions and even our little promotions in the indies, we've been able to work around it. And although we'd love to have 300 to 400 people at our shows, we're still happy and thankful we can get 100 in socially distanced circumstances. So, beggars can't be choosers. And if that's what 21 has to offer, and we can, do a socially distanced presentation, we will. But, if it gets cut off again and we can't, we don't know. But clearly since Thanksgiving, the numbers have escalated. So when people decided that the family was more important, we're not going to be scared by this virus, we're going to be with our family, that's great. Kudos to you for having no fear and wanting to be with your loved ones. But we have to think of the bigger picture here. The longer it takes for us to modify our behavior to live within the situation that we're in, the longer it's going to take for the situation to go away.
100%.
I'm hoping people do the right thing the rest of the year. So 2021, when it does come, it has a chance of being better than 2020. People say, well, 2020 has been awful. Well, okay, so it has, you're right. Mm-hmm. But if we're not careful, 2021 could be worse, and we could be looking at 2020 as the little brother to 2021. So we have to be smart. We have to care about each other. We have to look after each other, and we have to make good decisions, because if we don't, you're tired of not seeing wrestling live, right?
Absolutely.
You're tired of shows getting canceled, right?
Yep.
We're tired of watching the Thunderdome, aren't we?
Yep.
We've got ideas about WrestleMania and Super Brawl, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are those events going to look like if we're still dealing with this nonsense?
They're going to look like everything we've seen on TV for the past few months.
So stay home, live effectively, practice safely, do everything you're supposed to do so we can get through this. That's the best advice I can give to anybody.
Right. Yeah. Like you said, you mentioned Thanksgiving and stuff. This Thanksgiving, it was just me, my wife, and my son over at my mother-in-law's house. Like my mom was like, she will just wait to do something for Christmas, because my mom's, in her, upper 60s. My brother, and then I have a brother and a sister. We're all kind of spread out and stuff. It didn't make sense for us with everything going on to get together. As much as it sucked,
yeah,
we all understood.
But you made a good decision. It sucked. You're right. Not being with your family, and that's the way people look at it. You don't know how many more opportunities you're going to get to be with your family. So I get it. I understand. But it's a double-edged sword.
Right.
And you're going to get cut either way. So you kind of have to think big and bigger picture, sacrifice some things now so that the recovery rate is a little quicker and we can get back to a semblance of normal sooner. At least that's what I hope. I'll cross my fingers.
Well, I hope so too, because like you said, I've been to two shows since the pandemic started. I went to the very first Warrior Wrestling show that they did at the stadium. I didn't get a chance to go to the stadium series that they did when they did the 3 shows, every Saturday. And then I went to, the CCW show. Those are the only 2 shows I've been to since the pandemic started.
Well, if you're going to go to shows, you pick 2 damn fine ones to go with. I love Steve. I love Steve that runs Warrior Wrestling. He's a great guy. I had a chance to interview him. He's a great man, and he thinks big and he thinks bold, just like John Bullard does. So I appreciate those guys. We're going to get through it.
Absolutely.
Things are going to get better, and we're going to get back to wrestling. We're going to have a sold-out arena for WrestleMania where it's going to look like it used to. Things are going to get better. I believe they are, but I believe we all have to work together to make it better. And you know what? If we miss a Christmas Eve party, I'm prepared to live with it so I can go to next year's Christmas Eve party.
Right.
So I like to think big picture. I like to appreciate what I have, not what I don't.
Right.
At least that's what I try to do.
Right. And you mentioned too, just kind of going back a little bit, what you said about, the 2020, yeah, it sucked. But, I had a lot of good things happen this year. I started doing this podcast. I have another one that I do, and it's just so many doors and things have, opened and things like that. So, I have a lot to be grateful for this year too.
I'm not going to look back at 2020 as the worst year. I'm going to look back at 2020 as the year that I joined Chicagoland Championship Wrestling, and we started something special. And, when I'm looking back at next year after CCW does even bigger things, it's not going to matter. We're all going to be happy, and it's going to do well, and we're going to be excited about it. Life is what you make it.
Right.
Words are words. Life is what you make it. It only has the power you give it. So if you try to look positive like you just did, you might make it through and you might thrive and be happy. But if you're like, oh, this stinks, I can't go here, I can't do this, it's just negative energy that's wasted.
And it's okay to think that way because, it sucks. Like, I don't get to see my friends as much as I like to. Like I said, I had a group of friends. Like, we remember beginning of the year, we were like, oh, yeah, we're going to go to all these independent shows in the Chicago area. That obviously couldn't happen, and it's been a rough stretch. I look back to this year and even the year before, basically since the middle of 2019, it's been a long road for me because, I lost my father back in July 4th of 2019. And it's just one of the things that's really helped me get through that and really kind of get through what we're going on here is professional wrestling. Because, like 2 days after my dad passed away, I went to the MLW did a show in Cicero, and it was more or less just kind of getting my mind off things, even if it's just for a few hours. Wrestling's been very therapeutic to me over the years and stuff. And it's really one of the things that's helped me get through this pandemic by still seeing it every week by me doing this podcast and really getting to interact with, people like yourself, John, the wrestlers of CCW, and just in general. So, that's the wrestling is that one thing besides my family, my friends, that's been there for me without any, wanting anything back and stuff. So,
well, I can safely say this: without people like you, it wouldn't be good for us. It's a two-way street. You give to us, and we give to you. You give us the support and the strength to move forward and do the things we love to do. And we give you memorable moments and access and things that you enjoy. It's a two-way street, because without the fans and without the people that do the podcasts and without the people that work hard, it really wouldn't be much of an industry. So, we know how important fans, and we know how important the people that work in the podcast circuit and like that, supporters, how important you are. And that's why they're always happy to give you their time, because it's good for you, it's good for us, and it's good for everybody.
Right. And it's just like, I look at it this way, and I said this to C-Red after, interviewing him, having him on my latest episode. I felt like I started out that conversation with just, oh yeah, I'm just doing an interview for my podcast, and I felt like by the end of that, I felt like I was talking to a really good friend. And I'm actually, and not to blow, you can go ahead and pat yourself on the back for what I'm about to say, but I kind of have that same feeling about you. I reached out to you, had you, I was like, okay, time to do an interview for my podcast. But just through the last, however long we've been doing this, it's morphed into that same thing where I feel like now I'm having a conversation with a very good friend. And it's like I said, I just can't thank you enough for, allowing me to do this with you.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's very kind. And that's all we are. That's, we're just people. You're a person, I'm a person. We could be friends. You could be friends with C-Red. We're just people. We do great things and we do cool things, and it's exciting, and it makes us feel somewhat famous a little bit maybe, but we're all in this for the same thing. We love wrestling. This is our ode to it. And we represent it the best way we know how. So it's just natural for you and I to have a nice conversation, because we're both after the same thing. We both want to chat about it. We both want to talk about what we're doing, what we like, what we don't like. And, it's a casual conversation, and that's what friends do.
Absolutely. So before I let you go for the evening, I'm going to give you time. I know you got a show that you do with the aforementioned C-Red.
I do.
Yeah. And that's so why don't you, I'm going to give you the platform to talk about it here.
Okay. Well, prior to the pandemic, we were doing a show on the LRP network called Last Man Talking. And we really enjoyed doing that show. It was on the LRP network. It was more of a TV format. So it was good fun. We had great guests. I got beat up with a cake, beat up with a lot of food objects I got messed up with, but that's neither here nor there.
Was the cake good?
No, not good at all.
Okay.
Never give an angry lumberjack that is gluten-free a gluten-filled cake, because it'll end up in your nose and in your ears and in your I still owe Braun the lumberjack quite a bit for that messed up suit. There's a story that I'll tell you another time about the dry cleaner I took my suit to that was filled with cake, but that's for another time. For the next show, we'll talk about Braun the lumberjack and the cake.
Yes.
So Last Man Talking is a show that we were doing, but the station closed down because of the pandemic. So now C-Red and I are doing our little Steve Red Power Hour that we do on Zoom every week. And we're going to be off this week, but on December 16th, our next show is going to be a Christmas spectacular featuring the tag team Too Nerdy, which is Chicago's Sweetheart, Missa Kate, and the incomparable Sky Blue. So if you like women's wrestling and you like lady talent, these are two of the brightest stars in Chicago. And it's going to be a great holiday experience. That's December 16th. I also have another podcast that I do called The Gorilla Position. It's on Blog Talk Radio and 313 The Flash. It's a great show that I do out of Detroit with a guy named Martez Ale and my partner, the Macho Ghost. I don't know if you've ever heard him do that gimmick. It's a really, really fun thing that we do. And we start our new season in January. So we're excited to get back at it. We've had some great guests. Bill Alfonso blew us away. We've had so much fun with a lot of the guests. Al Snow was terrific. We've been so blessed with the guests that Martez books for us. So that's what I'm doing. And then hopefully next year, Chicago Style Wrestling will be back and better than ever. I've got a lot of chaos going there with a guy named Chris Miller. He and I GM'd a wrestler having some issues. Nick Brubaker's our champion, Bruce Brothers tag team champion. So it's a great promotion. Well, hopefully we'll get to work again. So I'm looking forward to that. And then, of course, April 17th, the Peace Day Resistance, Grapple Masters 2, Michigan City, Indiana. That card is just becoming more stacked by the moment. So a lot of exciting things to do, and I appreciate you letting me plug them.
Awesome. Well, I believe I covered everything that I wanted to with you. So for everybody that's listening, I want to take a moment to thank you for listening. Steve, thank you so much for doing this with me. And
it's a pleasure, DDJ. Thank you so much. If you ever want me to come back, I'm at your disposal.
I will definitely take you up on that because I want to hear those stories you were alluding to.
Got a lot of them. Got too many. Mitch Blake and a chalupa. Now that's a great story too. See, next time I got all these stories. I got a whole bag.
Well, there will definitely be a part 2 coming down the line because, again, I love hearing these types of stories and that. So Steve, I'm sure I'll be talking to you beforehand and stuff, but I look forward to actually seeing you on the 17th of April. And, who knows, maybe things will open up a little bit more by then.
We'll share a fine beverage and some fine stories. That's for sure. DJ, thank you for having me on your show. It's been a great pleasure. Keep on rocking, my friend. Thanks for the support at CCW. We all appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for those kind words. And it's stuff like that just going to make me support you guys even that much more. So thank you, Steve, and have a great evening.
Catch you on the flip side.
Thanks, Steve, for joining me. I really had fun sharing the excitement of what happened on AEW Dynamite Winter is Coming, along with hearing your great stories and what it's like to be a commentator. You can see Steve and Joey do their thing along with the rest of the Superstars of Chicagoland Championship Wrestling on April 17th, 2021. Tickets are still available at ChicagolandChampionshipWrestling.com. Information is coming across the screen. And for those of you who are listening to this on any of the major podcasting platforms, I will have the information for tickets on the episode description. Well, that's all the time I have for this episode of What Do You Say with DDJ. Tune in next week for episode 19 of What Do You Say with DDJ, which will be available in a week. Thanks.